This is your Tuesday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand, excited to be with you today. Got a lot coming up in just a little bit. I'll talk to Jerry Zgoda, who covers Minnesota United for the Star Tribune, for some soccer talk. I'll try to figure out how the Timberwolves can make a trade for John Collins of the Atlanta Hawks. He is my latest obsession with how to improve that team and a player who has been linked to them in trade discussions. But first, what did I miss? There was a lot going on in the news in the last 12 to 24 hours. Biggest thing, I think, news-wise, Dak Prescott signs a long-term contract extension with the Cowboys. And so here you go. Another quarterback off the board. This was kind of an expected move, I guess. They were at least going to put the franchise tag on Prescott with the deadline for that coming Tuesday, today. But they signed him to a long-term deal. Average value of that thing, very expensive, $40 million. So what does that mean for some other quarterbacks in your life? Well, one thing it means is nobody else is going to get Dak Prescott, obviously. So he's off the board, right? So in this kind of off season of volatility in the quarterback market, no Dak Prescott. So, if you see the Russell Wilson rumors, he's been talked about maybe going to the Cowboys. Well, that obviously isn't happening because Dak Prescott gets a huge contract and gets a no-trade clause as part of that. What else it means? Well, it means that Kirk Cousins slides down again on the quarterback contract chart, as it were. He's now the seventh highest-paid quarterback in the NFL in terms of average value. Dak Prescott coming in at $40 million now, slides in well ahead of Kirk Cousins. Cousins now at $33 million per season after that extension he signed a couple years back. So, does that feel about right? I don't know. If you look only at Pro Football Focus grades, which isn't exactly where you should only look, you'll see that Kirk Cousins has been a top 10 quarterback the last couple seasons. Has that been reflected in how the Vikings have performed throughout the length of his contract? Has that been reflected in how he has played in a lot of clutch situations? Not necessarily. And is there enough of a gap between the $33 million that he makes and, look at Aaron Rodgers, barely makes more than that, $33.5 million. Maybe that's why he wants a new deal. You can see a lot of other quarterbacks getting new deals, but I guess the bigger point stands that even if in terms of where he relatively stands in the quarterback market, it doesn't seem too outrageous. When you're paying a quarterback that much, you expect a certain level of play, especially in the fourth quarter and beyond. That's going to be expected of Dak Prescott now, and it has been expected of Kirk Cousins in these last 3 years under his larger contract with the Vikings. I don't know if he's lived up to that piece of it. He still could. But, big picture-wise, I guess you could make the argument that Kirk Cousins is about where he belongs salary-wise for where he has performed for the Minnesota Vikings. You also possibly missed a big, wild victory, 2-0 over Vegas on Monday night. Back at home at XL Energy Center, huge game for a rookie with the initials KK. Yeah, of course, I'm talking about Kappo Kahkonen, not Kirill Kaprizov. A shutout for the goalie. And that's 7 wins in a row for Kappo Kahkonen, guy that I've liked ever since watching him light it up in the minors a couple years ago for the Wild, thinking, why isn't this guy getting a longer look here, especially as Devin Dubnyk struggled the last couple of years. Nevertheless, he is here now and playing really well. I tweeted last night, Kappo Kahkonen is the Wild's number one goalie. Changed my mind. I don't know if we're quite there yet, but he's certainly playing like a number one, especially during this streak. That's 7 wins in a row. Reading now from Sarah McClellan's game story. During that streak, he has stopped 178 of 188 shots. That's about a 95 save percentage and a 1.47 goals against average. He is in the top 10 in a lot of different categories with overall this season, not just during this streak. So that's some pretty impressive stuff from this Wild goalie, and a big time for him to put that together, right? Because they're playing Vegas. Again, we talked about this on the podcast a couple times. That was the team where it fell apart a little bit last week, right? The Zach Parise game where they give up the late goal. They lose 5-1 when he gets benched. They play better against Arizona on Friday, but then they lose Saturday. This is a big one, right? They're trying to keep pace with with Vegas in the standings. And they don't have to do they don't have to do like a 5-4 win. They don't have to keep up with goals. They get a goalie delivering a shutout performance in a very important game. So that says to me that this goalie, Kappo Kahkonen, is ready to emerge as perhaps their number one option. And that's something to keep an eye on. The Wild has thrived in some seasons when they've had no clear number one goalie, where they've had two really good ones. You think back to the Manny Fernandez days with Dwayne Rollison. You think back to, you look back to like the 2007 season, Nicholas Backstrom and Manny Fernandez were still splitting a lot of games. But eventually, someone steps forward and becomes that number one guy. I feel like Kahkonen's got that in his game. That's a lot to put on a rookie this early in his career. So we'll see how that evolves. But big win for the Wild on Monday night and a huge performance by their rookie goaltender.
I'm Nyla Jean Myers, Senior Assistant Sports Editor at the Star Tribune. Thank you for listening to Strip Sports Daily Delivery. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast and our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
Happy to be joined right now by Jerry Zgoda. He covers Minnesota United for the Star Tribune and does a really good job of it. Follow his stuff, Star Tribune, startribune.com. Loons season kind of getting underway here with some training sessions. I think they go down to Florida in a couple of weeks and then start the regular season in April towards the end of that month. Jerry, welcome to Daily Delivery. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Mike?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. We got some sunshine here in the last few days. It's not quite like Florida, but it does feel good to be outside right now. And hopefully Minnesota United feels the same way, able to do some of that here as opposed to being in the freezing cold at least.
Maybe some of the snow will melt and they'll actually get out onto the outdoor pitch.
Maybe we'll have to see. But I read your Q&A with Adrian Heath. I think that ran in Monday's paper and on StarTribune.com. A lot of things of interest with this team, especially coming off of last season, the very near miss. I mean, in case anybody wasn't paying as much attention, obviously last year was a weird year in sports. The Loons were basically minutes away from playing in the MLS Cup final. They had a 2-0 lead in the 75th minute. They had a 2-1 lead still in the 89th minute, end up falling 3-2 and coming up a little bit short. I guess you talked to Adrian Heath about a lot of different things. The first thing I got a sense that this is still lingered with him for a while, just how close they got and, knowing that it's hard to get back to that point. What was your takeaway from that aspect of things with him and just kind of getting that, that taste out of his mouth in this offseason?
Yeah, you can tell it. So he said it took him about a week before he went back and watched it. And, they actually came within a minute of it. They were still up 2-1 in the 89th minute, and they surrendered 2 goals in 4 minutes, including stoppage time. And, you could feel the momentum change. I mean, they were kind of not lucky, but they were fortunate to be up 2-0. But then you could feel the Sounders made some subs, and they started to get some momentum. And then they score in the 75th minute. You go, oh, geez, can they just hang on these last 15 minutes? And he's convinced that if they'd had those 2 extra days, they had moved their game. Seattle had played on a Tuesday, their conference semifinal, Western semifinal, and the Loons were supposed to play Tuesday or Wednesday, I believe, and it got moved to a Thursday so that they could go live on Fox, because Fox had that problem with one of the NFL games being canceled. So the MLS saw this chance to go on the big network and put Kansas City and the Loons in that, and they gave them 2 less days than Seattle. And he thought, in retrospect, he goes, no ifs and buts, we didn't win, but he thought that they could get the team built back up in those next 2 days, and that would have made a difference. Whether that's just the coach, saying that, or whether it's true, who knows? But that was the story, and he was sticking with it.
When a team gets that close, we tend to assume that they can be right back into that mix the next year, but it's not always that easy. You kind of forget about, some, like you said, maybe some breaks or some, emergences they had along the way. As you assess this roster going into 2021, and as Adrian Heath assesses it, where are the strengths and where do they still need to figure some things out?
Well, the strengths are it starts with Emmanuel Reynoso from the beginning of training camp instead of coming in September. So that's a big difference, but they still have some glaring needs. You know, they lost Kevin Molino. He signed with Columbus after 10 years with Adrian, and you know they've got a spot on the left side to fill with a Molino, and they've got Reynoso, and they still really they signed Juan Aguadelo last week, who will give them some depth at striker, but they still need to go out and get a main striker. That's what they still lack. Maybe two of them, but they're in position to get another designated player. They could create one in a couple different ways. So they go out, spend some money, get a pretty big signing for them. That's what they really need to do here. In the Q&A, Adrian said, you know, we need to go out and sign two guys, that left side attacker for Molino and a striker to give the tools to Reynoso to play make with. And they need to do it soon, you know, before you get to the start of the season. There's always, you know, the timing of these transfer windows. Sometimes, like Reynoso, things they were working on at one point, 8 months later, they come to fruition. You know, there's still stuff I guess that they're talking about that could come to happen in the summer signing transfer, but they really need to do a couple moves here before we get to the start of the season, April 17th or 18th.
Yeah, it does sound like they've you know, Reynoso, it does start with him. And you see, when you start from that base with the guy who was emerging kind of as the next star in this market, and we shouldn't forget about him even as we have, you know, Kirill Kaprizov mania with the Wild, and we've watched some other, you know, young players emerge. I mean, this guy was so good. I think you asked Adrian Heath if he can be even better, and he made it sound like, I don't know, that'd be great if he was, but man, he was awfully good already. You know, so when you start from there, you know, how much easier does it get, I guess, to fill in around him?
Yeah, the question is not only, you know, in the market here, he could be, if he continues this through a whole season, you know, one of these stars of MLS. Then I asked Adrian, you know, do fans have to worry that you're not going to be able to keep him for all 4 years of this contract they signed him to? And he goes, we're trying to build a champion. You know, no. We're trying to build a championships team. You don't get rid of your best players. But at some point, you know, that's what the MLS is becoming. They're starting to become a league that is developing players and then moving them on mostly to Europe, you know, selling them for a good price. And that's how the economics, the price of milk, how this league is starting to work now. So, but no doubt, gifted. I mean, I can't remember the exact number. I should know that off the top of my head, but consecutive multi-assist games he had down the stretch last year. And you can just tell the guy sees the field, and you can tell that's a different class of play coming from first division, Boca Juniors in South America to the typical guy that the Loons have signed in their history.
You get the sense that they're confident they're going to be able to fill in those kind of major roster gaps. I mean, he said they're in negotiations, but those don't always come to fruition. What's your confidence level based on what you got the sense from Adrian on the major signings front?
Well, he said I talked to him last week for the Q&A. He said, you know, they had two that had come really close and then just didn't materialize. So you're always going through that. I mean, their history, they've the last several transfer windows, they've gone out and done things. Now Reynoso, it took a little while. That may be the case here. That maybe you don't get that striker. That's probably why they signed the MLS veteran striker last week, just, you know, in case they needed him to get them through maybe to the summer transfer period. But I would expect them to try mightily to get certainly a striker and probably that left side attacker in too. You know, while they've still got some training time here, get some. He seemed to make a point. You know, you need to integrate those guys with Reynoso and give them a chance to work together. Hard to do it last year like they did, but with some great success. You know, when they brought him in end of August, beginning of September, but they much prefer, you know, to get the guys on the grass. Certainly, sometime in Florida, you know, they're going to be down there for 2 weeks playing 4 or 5 games. Get that, and then just get guys to know with each other, because it's always hard to bring them in, you know, the middle of July. You saw that a year ago with Robin Ludd. You know, people were ready to say, "What kind of terrible signing is this?" Because he just came in, didn't have a off season from his season, and you know, wasn't productive. And then last year, you saw what he could do, and now let's see if they keep him on that right side even further. What more he can do this year?
You got expectations raised this year. I know they made the playoffs 2 years ago. Got, you know, eliminated right away by Los Angeles. But when you make a run like that, even in a shortened season as it was, you raise expectations. Do you Do you get the sense that they understand that they're kind of striving to kind of meet that moment, both in the league and in the marketplace?
Well, if they are, Adrian's raising them because he basically said, my goal is each transfer window to improve. And where you look at where we were last year, there isn't much place to go other than to win something. So, does that mean win the Western Conference Final? Does it mean MLS Cup? As you said, it's hard to get back. Circumstances, sometimes you may not get back there. A lot of times, from doing this for 30 years, teams that don't have a history, will make a big push, run, and get to a certain level, get almost there. And then the next year, people expect them to go further. And there's almost like the step back that's needed, that they don't do quite as well. And then the next season after that, they kind of become what they become. I've seen that happen in the NBA a lot. I don't know the MLS league well enough to know if that's a phenomenon that happens there too. But a lot of times that happens. The team makes a push, they kind of come out of nowhere, they get the final. And next year, people think, oh, they're going to take the next step. And they go backwards. And then when they finally figured out, what this is all about and what it takes to play at that level, then that next year they make a leap. So we'll see. If they didn't get back this year, certainly wouldn't surprise me. That's a tough thing to do any year, but I guess a lot of that depends on what moves they make here and what help they can give. They've made a lot of moves to kind of put little surrounding pieces around to make themselves better, but they still have the two kind of major moves yet to make.
We've talked a lot, like we said, about the kind of bigger names. Who's kind of on the, I don't say the fringes, but maybe some players who are younger, maybe looking for their chance to emerge this year? Give me who's like 2 or 3 names to maybe watch as, maybe weren't huge contributors last year, but could push for more time and more of that spotlight in 2021.
That's a good question. I know who it won't be. It won't be Thomas Chacon, who was their big signing 2 years ago, and he was 19 and just hasn't found his place. Has looked awfully small, and they're working a deal to get him back to play on loan in Uruguay. I guess the one guy maybe is a guy like Ja'Cory Hayes, who you saw take a role last year. He's back. They lost Raheem Edwards in this re-entry draft to LAFC, so they don't have him. But Ja'Cory, they used him, plugged him in a lot of different ways. A lot of the moves they made this year was to kind of add some veterans. Not in every case old guys, but the first move they went out first couple of days of free agency and signed Will Trapp, who people might think is like 35 because he's been around forever. He was on the U.S. national team, played years in Columbus, but he's only 28. So he's the kind of guy. They went out and got a guy, Jukka Rattala, I'll try his name, a Finnish teammate of Robin Lutz, who's a little bit older. I think he's 31, 32, but they got him to give a little competition to Chase Gasper on the left-hand side. Of the younger guys, you might not see a lot this year, but you may see them elsewhere. You got guys like Dane St. Clair and Hassan Dotson and Callum Montgomery, a new guy they signed, who might end up playing for their respective either U.S. or Canada Olympic teams. So you got those guys who may, like Hassani's in camp now for Olympic qualifying in Mexico. If he would make the Tokyo team, you wouldn't see him for a number of weeks. And the other two guys play for the Canadian team. You wouldn't see them either. And then in the summer, you got the Euro. So you got Lud and Rattala and Jan Gregus who are going to be gone. So, their depth, which they've really kind of cultivated the last couple of years, they're really going to need in a year like this because the schedule is going to be condensed to begin with anyways. Because usually by now we'd be into probably the second or third week of the MLS season. They'd already have training and, they're still just going to camp because of the elongated season last year. So, even though they're going to play again MLS Cup into December, it's still going to be a lot of Saturday, Wednesday games, and you're going to need everybody, as Adrian says.
A couple more things for you, then we'll finish up. Good stuff here from Jerry Zgoda on Minnesota United. Can they play 4 goalkeepers at the same time? Because it seems like that's a position they seem pretty well stocked up at.
Yeah, as Adrian says, we got them young, we got them. Well, he didn't say old, experienced. That'll be an interesting thing to watch with Tyler Miller back from his 2 hip surgeries. Dane St. Clair, you could see why they spent the 7th overall pick on him a couple of years in the draft. Now, whether he ends up playing for Canada, that may solve some of their problems, in July and in the qualifying period. But, can you keep both those two happy? And Adrian kind of just said, yeah, of course you can. So we'll see how that plays out. He said no decisions have been made, though, when they're both here, let them kind of slug it out, I guess. But And then they signed the third backup goalie, veterans, and Dejas last year that they brought back. And then you got the maybe he's 17 now. He was 16. I know his birthday's somewhere around here. Fred Emmings, the guy, the homegrown player, first one they signed a year ago, who they say has grown even more in the year since they signed him last year. And he was like 6'5", I think then. So who knows how tall he is now.
Last thing, I know, last season there was no in-person attendance at United games. Where are they at in terms of that thinking? Obviously, Allianz is an outdoor space. You've got the Twins talking about getting a return to at least some limited attendance starting in April. Do you know where their thought process is on that is at the start and as the season goes along?
Well, I know they've been in communication with all the pro sports teams, but I think even a little more so with the Twins. I mean, it all depends on the governor's office. It's still 250 people, I think, is the limit. They had family and friends to that number late last year in the season, but I know they're hopeful. I don't think maybe they have a number in mind in their head, but they're not saying publicly what that is. I don't know if they give a plan that says this is what it would look like if we allowed 3,000 fans or we allowed 5,000 fans. But I know they're hopeful as the season goes on that they're going to get fans back in, but all it depends is on the state and the health department and the governor's office guidance and recommendation.
Well, great stuff, Jerry. We'll be in touch for sure on this podcast as the season gets closer to starting next month, and certainly as we see how they fare in 2021. Jerry, thanks for joining me today on Daily Delivery.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
When you hear that sound, and it's been a little while since you heard that sound, it is because I feel like a trade machine. That jingle, again, courtesy of Trevor Wogan at Jazz Ghost on Twitter. Love that. Love being able to play that every time. I feel like a trade machine. So here we go. My latest obsession. Last week, The Athletic had a report that the Wolves are exploring the power forward market. Two names at the top of that list. Orlando's Aaron Gordon, Atlanta's John Collins. Aaron Gordon may be more the household name, but John Collins is the guy that I really want the Wolves to be after. Even beggars can't be choosers. The Wolves are 7-29. They clearly have roster issues. They clearly can use help at power forward, but Collins seems to me like the better target, the better overall fit, and I wrote about this a lot blog post Tuesday morning. So Collins turned out a $90 million extension last offseason, so he's looking for maybe a max deal. I don't know if that's his market, but he's going to be a restricted free agent after this season. Now, restricted free agency obviously is a nice place for the Wolves to operate. They're not going to get a lot of unrestricted free agents to come here. So the trade market plus the restricted free agent market is a way for them to bring in a player, before they hit free agency and then have the option to keep them and match any other offer that player gets. They did that with, Malik Beasley, who we'll get to again here in just a moment as we work through some trade possibilities with John Collins and the Hawks. Now the Hawks, for whatever reason, maybe they don't want to pay him that much. They seem open to a deal. They say they're not going to let him go for nothing. Maybe they take him all the way to restricted free agency, work out a sign and trade. Maybe they do end up keeping him, but it seems like there's something there where he will be available in a trade. So what would that take? Well, Collins is a good player, capable 3-point shooter, right? Shooting almost 39% from behind the arc this year, 37.4 for his career. So he's a good finisher. He's a good free throw shooter. He's got a lot of offensive efficiency to his game for a power forward. He's got some defense to him too, though. He ranks among the top 10 among forward/centers in defensive plus-minus, real plus-minus this season. He blocked 66 shots last year in just 41 games. That number's gone down a little bit this year. Hawks kind of have some crowded marketplace there in the among their power forwards and centers, so he's not getting as many rebounds and blocks as he once did, but still averaging 18 points, 7.6 rebounds and a block per game this season for the Hawks, who have been a little bit disappointing this year. They fired their coach, 16-20. So here's the thing. He's gonna cost a lot, both in terms of what it takes to sign him in the offseason and in terms of the assets they would need to trade to get him. I was texting with ESPN front office insider Bobby Marks about this on Monday. Bobby was on the show, last month at some point, talking about the trade market. He said on Monday in our back and forth, he thinks the Wolves would struggle to come up with the assets to make a run at Collins. Fair enough, but I tried anyway. Trade Machine, ESPN.com, 3 different possibilities. One involves Malik Beasley. You send out Malik Beasley, you send out Jaden McDaniels, who everybody loves here, and you send out your future 2024 first-round pick. You get John Collins, you get Tony Snell, the second piece of it to make the money work. The Collins trade is a little complicated because he only makes $4 million this year. He's still in the last year of his rookie deal, so any kind of money matching, you got to add some salary to it usually if you're going to come up with equitable pieces, because most of the players you're going to get back in a trade like that are going to have a little bit of salary attached to them. So what about that? Well, I think that's okay. You're giving up Beasley, who's been a really good player for you, but I don't think that's a terrible price to pay to get someone of John Collins' stature. I don't think that's enough for the Hawks, though, probably. What about option number 2? Anthony Edwards, Jake Layman, and Naz Reid for Snell and Collins. So you're giving up on your number 1 overall pick pretty early. You're giving Jake Layman, a solid veteran, and Naz Reid, a cost-controlled, intriguing center who's been a pretty efficient scorer himself this season. Maybe that works. Is giving up Edwards a lot? Yeah, but before the draft, the Wolves were talking about maybe trading that pick. If you could trade that pick for a guy who's averaged 21 points and 10 rebounds last season, would you have done that at the time? Yeah, probably, or at least maybe. Last trade, Beasley, Edwards, and Naz Reid for Tony Snell, John Collins, and Cam Reddish. I think we're getting closer to the truth here that it would probably take a couple of pretty big assets to get a player of Collins' stature. Now, I don't know that exactly. I don't know exactly what the market is. But if you're enamored with this idea of, acquiring players on the timeline of Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell, Collins is only 23. He'll be 24 at the start of next season. He kind of fits that timeline. You'd have to pay him a lot, but you're also sending out quite a bit of salary. Is that the kind of player you want to kind of go all in on, the kind of player that's gettable right now and that you could re-sign as a restricted free agent? I'm intrigued by it. We'll see if anything comes of it, but that is my Trade Machine infatuation for the time being. Let's end things with the cooler now that I've just included Naz Reid's name in multiple trade possibilities in that last segment. I want you to go read Chris Hines' story about Naz Reid. Really cool piece. Just went online Tuesday morning about Naz Reid and his relationship with his middle school art teacher and how that kind of fostered a love of drawing that he carries with him still to today. He says it's a peaceful space from basketball or everywhere else. It keeps me focused and sane and things like that. It's something that's been important to me. It's just a cool story. One of those, feel good is maybe the wrong word, but it just kind of takes you behind the behind the scenes of what some of these players are really like. I've always liked dealing with Naz Reid. I think he's a good guy. He's been engaging in any media sessions I've ever been in, but this story takes it to another level. So go read that, StarTribune.com by Chris Hine. Just a really cool story that should brighten up your day to a certain degree. That'll do it for today. Thanks for listening. Tomorrow's show should be chock full of hockey talk. Sarah McClellan expected to join me, our beat writer, as well as Marcus Foligno from the Minnesota Wild, looking at some other good stuff later in the week, too. So thank you for spending some time with me today, and we will catch you again on Wednesday.